I'm Reverend Bonnie, the community spiritual leader here at the center. And it is already December, so it is the season
to be jolly.
To be jolly. I was going to say, but for what? So how do you complete that? To be jolly. 'Tis the season for?
Happiness.
Happiness. Anyone else? Healing? Is that what I heard? Giving. For the reason. The reason for the season. Well, I think there's a lot of things that we think about when we think about what this season is about. As we move into December, there's a lot of different things we think about to be jolly. So for joy, for peace, for love. But it can also become a season of frenzy. It can be a season when we're thinking we need to get out there and do all that shopping or not. It can be that season for decorating in some way or another, which we're going to do here at the center in addition to celebrating our birthday today. It can be a season for seeing people that we don't see very often, and sometimes there's a reason why we don't see those people very often. And it can be a season for remembering. Sometimes it's a season for remembering things that we really enjoyed about our life, maybe some experiences at this time of year when we were growing up. And sometimes it can be a really hard time of remembering, maybe not so joyful times, or maybe people that we're missing that used to be with us, that used to celebrate things with us at this time of year and aren't here anymore. It's also a season for cooking, and then for some people, it's the season of realizing that they don't even have enough to eat, and that it's cold, or that we can't eat, or we choose not to eat everything that's laid out in front of us, for whatever reason. So it's a season for celebrating for many, and it's also a season for isolating for many. It's often that season, I think, when we start to compare our insides with what's going on out there. And sometimes how we're feeling inside isn't showing up out there. We see all the glitz and the glitter, those Hallmark movies that always have the perfect family with the perfect ending. We have all the decorations, we have the cheery greetings, we have the gifts that are either given to us or we see being exchanged between others. And sometimes what's going on in here doesn't match that. Now, at other times, it can be the opposite. As I was sitting in the meditation this morning, I was thinking about our dear friend R.J. Crabb, who passed away. I think many of you already know that. And I remembered what it was like watching him speak up here. And he was so full of energy, and he'd be pacing and going up and down the aisles and all this energy. And I have to tell you, my insides are doing that every time I'm speaking. It just doesn't show on the outside. I feel that kind of energy, and I always wanted to be able to express that way. But that's not my way. I tend to stay a little more grounded, a little more calm, but inside is a whole different story, what's going on. So if we create our reality, if we create what's going on in our lives, how do we create the kind of season we want to experience at this time of year? What are we doing to help bring that about? Recently, several weeks ago, I had a very loving and gentle reminder from a dear friend who told me that when I am preparing for Sunday here and I'm running around worried if the band is going to get here on time, worried if the speaker is going to show up on time, worried if the sound system is going to work, that I'm not contributing to a very peaceful experience for people when they walk through the door. So I had to look at that. I had to look about inside me what's in alignment with what we really believe. This person was calling me back into alignment to practice what we teach, that everything is in divine order, that when we get together, we're getting together to celebrate life and grow together. And that's going to happen whether the service starts exactly on time or not, whether those clocks are connected to the same time or not, whether we even have the music and the sound and everything working the way we want it to or not, it's still going to happen. That's why we're here. And so I had to remember that, to be reminded to walk in integrity. Imagine practicing the principles on Sunday, go figure. And applying it to what we do right here in this center. Well, this reminder came at a perfect time because it came a few weeks before Thanksgiving. And for Thanksgiving, many of you know we had a sign-up sheet to invite people to join us here at the center for Thanksgiving. And so I counted up all the people who had signed up, and I set up the tables and made sure there was a place setting for everyone who had signed up. And then the first 4 people to walk through the door were people who hadn't signed up. But then I reminded myself, no, everything is in divine order. Everything unfolds as it should. Now, 2 of those people didn't even come with food. No, everything always unfolds perfectly. This place always has plenty of food. Even though we spend a lot of time worrying about it, there's always plenty of food. And so I brought myself back into center, and surprise, surprise, there was plenty of food. We had a few place settings left over. And we had somebody come through the door that said, "Can I play music for you?" We had live music while we ate. And then that person joined us for food. So it was an excellent, excellent reminder for me that everything really is in divine order. And so now it's December and it is the season. And yet I figured that this time of year, we probably have the highest expectations of ourselves and others compared to any other time in the year. Think about it. So, if that's true, then it's the perfect season to practice what our principles are. Now, some of you might be wondering, what are those principles? And if you've never taken a class and you're just hanging out with us because we're a lot of fun, which I think we are, and it seems like we do have it all together, that outside look, it's important to consider what those principles are, and I'm not going to go through them all right here because January is the month that we reconsider all those principles. And the practitioners are going to help me go through the first 4 books of the Science of Mind text and bring you a perspective of what those principles are and how they're working in our lives so that at some level, eventually, we do get our insides congruent with what's going on outside. We get our insides to feel the peace that we want to experience in the world. We start to have a real experience of joy in the season of being jolly. And at some point, as we practice these principles, we learn how to muster up and to move into and experience the love that we want to have for everyone, even those people who might challenge us at this time of year, that we might be spending time with that we don't at other times of the year, or those people out in the crowds and those many shoppers that are in the line with us. Wherever it is, we are learning through these principles to bring ourselves back to that center of love. So the question that I had asked this week was, what role, if any, does forgiveness play in this whole process? Our Healing Consciousness group brought that up this week, and largely because it's the theme for the Science of Mind magazine this month. So if you want to read a lot of interesting and perspectives on forgiveness, get the magazine if you don't already have it, because that is what it's focused on. And next week, I'm actually speaking again. And I will be speaking about forgiveness and the role of darkness at this time of year. It's not always a bad thing. So we'll be looking at how darkness feeds us and supports us at this time of year. But for now, I want to continue to look at how do we bring about those feelings of peace and joy and love that we want to experience at this time of year. So let's go back to that place where I said, I think it's the time of year when we have the highest expectations of ourselves and of others. We have expectations about what we're celebrating, how we're celebrating, why we're celebrating, and we probably have traditions that come from our childhoods or that we've started to create in our own lives. And if you don't believe that there's issues around those types of things at this time of year, think back to the first time you tried to merge your traditions with either a roommate's, a partner's, or a spouse's at this time of year. Those are always different. I came to realize as I was putting this together, I really believe there's probably as many right ways to celebrate at this time of year, as there are households or even individuals who are celebrating and who have traditions. So my question is, what is important to you at this time of year? And why is it important to you? How can we bring new meaning into our cherished traditions, or how can we create new ones that better serve who we are today and what we believe today? Remember, I started out by asking you how you would complete the sentence, "'Tis the season." So think about what came up in your mind, and are there any expectations connected to how you completed that sentence? If we want something specific from this season, if we want to experience joy and peace and love, what are we doing to help create it? What are we doing in our own thinking and in our own consciousness to bring that about? You know that we often say, more times than you probably ever cared to hear, change your thinking, change your life. So how does that apply to this season and this time of year? What are we thinking about it? What are we holding as expectations? And how can we change that? In August, I read an article in the Science of Mind magazine, and I saved it for now because I really thought it showed us a great example of how that can work. This is David Alt was doing the daily meditations in the magazine at that time, and he told a story about being invited to go deep sea fishing. And apparently he'd never been deep sea fishing before. So this was a brand new experience. And he was picturing something a little different, I think, than what ended up happening, because he said he ended up on a commercial charter with professional fishermen. And this was his first time. He said, "I knew nothing about the intricacies required. The dozen skilled fishermen began perching themselves along the railings and casting their lines. Within a matter of minutes, a hard jolt pulled my nylon cord. Gripping the handle, I pulled and bucked the line to gain control, but the weight of the other end felt enormous. Grunting and gasping, excuse me, I started frantically crawling over and under the rest of the fishermen that encircled the deck as the catch began zigzagging around the circumference of the boat. On the sixth revolution around, several sympathizers gathered beside me with a net and a bunch of extra hands, offering to assist in raising my catch out of the water. There it was, the results of my efforts, a 47-pound king mackerel. Now, some of them high-fived me saying congratulations, but most of them muttered under their breath, beginner's luck. But what David had to say about that is what I thought was really important today. Was it beginner's luck, or was it beginner's allowing? As beginners in anything, we haven't yet developed our muscles of cynicism, nor the resistance that comes after disappointment. There can be optimism and mystery, a childlike, clean slate of acceptance where all kinds of possibilities are free to appear. As beginners, we are in a much greater state of natural allowing. Consciousness responds, creating demonstration the way it always can be, swift and, yes, natural. After trying new things, many of us plant seeds of futility based on their history of disappointments. How do we retain optimism and a sense of allowing? That state of purity still exists within each one of us and patiently waits for recognition. Think about the song. I loved it, laying down whatever it is in your past that doesn't work. Those things that have created those seeds where we feel futility or disappointment. How can we bring a new beginner's allowing to this season? The excitement that we want to experience, that childlike excitement and joy. Well, it goes back in my mind to that idea that everything really is in divine order. Instead of worrying about doing, which is what I tend to do, and I wrote the word D-O, and I realized D-O, divine order. Everything really is in divine order. And if I can remember as I'm doing, that everything really is in divine order, I can just let it go. I can move back into that space of love. So just indulge me for a moment. Take a moment in whatever way you're comfortable to just go within your own mind, your own thoughts. What expectations do you have for this time of year? What expectations do you have for yourself? Any expectations around your willpower and how that's supposed to behave around food or other people and in situations? What expectations do you have for yourself in regard to your home? How is it supposed to look and feel? And what expectations do you have for family, whether they're kids or parents or partners, spouses, or your friends? Are there any expectations around words that are going to be shared, phone calls made, visits, or even gifts exchanged? How do you expect people to behave during this season? And so now, within your mind's eye again, imagine those words, divine order. What does that conjure up for you? What does divine order look like? What does it sound like? And how does it behave? Is divine order always the way you want it? Or is there something grander about divine order? And now ask your higher self, how can I turn my expectations into that allowing, that newness? How can I turn my doing into divine order? How can I release my expectations and open to divine order? And as you're still within, consider these words of Ernest Holmes. Know that you alone are the doorkeeper to the temple of the Holy Ghost, your body. You have the power to say what shall enter there. No false thing can enter there while you are recognizing your oneness with the infinite life. You are sending out only thoughts of peace, love, and joy, and no irritating thought or thing can come back to annoy or obstruct the perfect functioning of every organ of your body. The passages of your mind are open only to the inflow and the outflow of good. You are sensitive only to good, dwelling in the higher altitudes of consciousness, understanding life in its spiritual purpose, experiencing exhilaration, vitalization, and exaltation. And so it is. So hold on to that. I'm not done. But you can clap if you want to. Hold on to that thought. Because I think it's important to notice how in that reading and in the reading that Teresa did earlier, Holmes is mixing what's going on physically in our body with what's going on in our minds, what's going on in our spiritual life. He doesn't separate them. Oh, over here we're going to pray for our physical being, and over here we're going to pray for our well-being emotionally or spiritually. It's all interconnected, whether it's your heart, your mind, whatever's going on, and what's going into your body, what you're feeding yourself at this time of year. So sometimes when we want to release our expectations, when we're ready to change our thinking about whatever that story is, being able to change the story about whatever it was that occurred that we're carrying along with us can help us to change our attitudes and our feelings. So hear that again. It's the story. It's what we tell ourselves about what we experienced that could impact how we're feeling and what our attitude is about it. I read this in the Spirituality and Health magazine for this November, December. And in here, Rabbi Rami Shapiro answers questions that are sent in to him by the readers. And this one took me a little by surprise, but I thought it was a perfect example of this because this is a familiar story to many of us at this time of year, and then he gives us a different way of understanding it. So the person wrote in, "I don't mean to sound anti-Jewish, but the manger story infuriates me. This person, for some reason, is still holding Jewish people today accountable for how she perceived the story taking place 2,000 or more years ago. She says that you would deny a room to a pregnant woman and force her to give birth in a stable. Why would you do that?" So here's Rabbi Rami's response. Kindness. Ancient inns weren't like today's hotels. Inns back then were cramped and raucous, with strangers sharing dirty rooms and often dirtier straw beds. They were no place for a woman to give birth. The innkeeper in the Jesus story had compassion for Mary, inviting her to make herself comfortable in a bed of clean straw in the privacy of a stable that allowed her to maintain her dignity as she gave birth to her child. A different take on that story, isn't it? So, what kinds of things might we be having or holding in us that are stories that equate to there's no room at the inn? It was horrible that these people kicked them out into a stable. And how can we change the same facts, the story, so that it becomes a clean, quiet, dignified place to give birth? I think we all have those stories. And as we learn to shift our thinking about them, as we learn to rewrite those stories and change our thinking, we start to appreciate what is. And we let folks around us know that we appreciate them. We look for any opportunity to express appreciation. We let people know wherever we meet them throughout this season that we do appreciate all that they're doing, all that they're experiencing at this time. And once we've moved into appreciation, I think it's easier then to make it 'tis the season for love. To bring love back into our experience. It's hard to have to keep coming back to the mic. I have been looking for years for the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying because I've heard wonderful things about it, and I finally found it in Koaz. And I opened up to this prayer that I thought was perfect for this idea of opening ourselves up to love. This is a prayer that's said in Tibet to invoke the presence of the Master in our heart. From the blossoming lotus of devotion at the center of my heart, rise up, O compassionate Master, my only refuge. I am plagued by past actions and turbulent emotions. To protect me in my misfortune, remain as the jewel ornament on the crown of my head, the chakra of great bliss, arousing all my mindfulness and awareness, I pray. Can you just see that? The beautiful lotus of love expressing, blossoming in your heart, sitting on your head to protect you from all those thoughts, all those old emotions, all that stuff that we're carrying around. Ernest Holmes has a section in the Science of Mind text called Finding the Christ. And in there he said, the mystic Christ comes from the bosom of the unseen, proclaiming the love of God through its own love of humanity. Again, allowing that love to blossom forward. So, 'tis the season for love. 'Tis that season when love is all there is, God is all there is, if we can allow ourselves to stay in that place of remembering that love is the divine order of the day. That all that doing is divine order. And that we can allow ourselves to love everything and everyone as they show up in our lives. When I was reminded, like I told you several weeks ago, about what is the principle and how we stay in integrity and in principle even on Sundays, I was reminded too of my initial intent when I started out here as your community spiritual leader. Way back, my initial intent was just to love everybody. I felt like if we just brought love back into the center, it would heal all of whatever had been going on for several years. That was my initial intent, not to worry about what time things happened or how many people showed up or not. And so I decided to move myself back into that space of just loving everybody. And as soon as I decided to do that, November Science of Mind magazine had an article in here called Love is the Answer. And in this, she's talking about prosperity mostly, but she shared in here that a practitioner in her church started a new practice. And that practice was to say, I love life, I love myself, I love my center, I love the finances of my center, I love everybody who comes into my center, and that's the practice that he started doing. So I asked the board at our last meeting to join me in this practice. And what I've started doing, and what I absolutely love, I've found, doing every morning, I've been doing it now for several weeks, is I start out, I love life, I love myself, I love this center. And then I say, I love all the board members, and I name each one, and I see their face. I love all the practitioners, and I name each one, and I see their faces. I love all of the staff, and I see each one, and I name them. I love all our volunteers, and I see each face and name them. And I love everyone who comes through the doors, and I'm remembering every face, everyone I greet on Sunday, everyone who comes at other times during the week, and use your names. What an amazing experience. Sometimes it takes me an hour and a half. It really does, because I'll go, oh, and this, and they're healing from that, and, a little prayer shows up. But by the time I'm done, I just feel so full of love. And what's been really interesting is I've been getting phone calls from people. You've been on my mind. Are you okay? I'm not kidding. More than one. Today, Sarah sent me a Facebook right after I got done. You've been on my mind. I love you. The love is coming back. Here I am, I'm sitting here just sending it out, and people are saying, you're so important to me. Your Facebook post, Deb, thank you. And Teresa, too. There's just been this feeling as it wafts out there, it's definitely coming back, and that certainly wasn't something I expected, but people are picking up on it. So I'm asking you all to join me in this practice of love, especially during this season. Just take the time in the morning. I love life. I love myself. And then start listing everyone you can think of. I've included my family, the challenging ones too. And we'll see where that takes us. So as I wrote out everything that I talked about here today, I realized that I talked about releasing expectations, moving into appreciation, and love. And that spells real. And it popped into my head, keep it real this season, Bonnie. Keep it real. Release those expectations, move into appreciation, and move into love. And as I do that, my goal is to let that doing actually be everything flowing in that beginning allowing of divine order. I love you all, and so it is.